Hi, my name's Evelyn, and last summer I stood at my parents' front door, holding a gift I'd saved for weeks, only for my own mother to stare me dead in the face and say, "Sorry, I think you've got the wrong house." Then she slammed the door. No hesitation, no mistake, just eraser. It was a rejection so sharp it felt like a blade, cutting away decades of my loyalty in a single moment. But what hurts worse than being disowned is realizing you were never really seen to begin with. Not when you paid the bills. Not when you bought the dress your sister wore that night. Not when they toasted using the wine crate you designed. So tell me, what would you have done if your whole life you gave and gave, just to be cut out of the picture, like a stranger at your own family's party? Before we begin, drop a comment. Where are you listening from? And have you ever been treated like you didn't exist? Because this is the story of the door they shut, and the one I finally walked through. The sun beat down as I stepped out of the rental. Naples hadn't changed much, still as postcard perfect as ever. Wide driveways, warm porch lights, trimmed hedges dressed in palm fronds. The kind of neighborhood that made people believe in happy families and holiday cards. I held a small silver box close to my coat, the satin ribbon neat, unwrinkled. Tucked inside was a hand-ribbon note and an heirloom pin I'd inherited from Grandma Joy. It felt right to give it back tonight. 45 years, that's what they were celebrating my parents' emerald anniversary. I'd spent months planning my return, hoping this gift would bridge the gap they'd widened over years of neglect. I hadn't been back in 4 years, but when the invitation never came, I told myself it was an oversight, that maybe Mom just forgot to click send, so I clicked my own submit button, booked the flight, and drove out here. Hope foolish, maybe, but I still had it. Hope that maybe they'd be surprised, maybe even happy. I walked up the stone path, heart tapping against my ribs. The porch lights were on. Inside, I could hear the soft hum of jazz, clinking glasses, laughter rising and fading like waves. Someone was singing along to Ella Fitzgerald? I reached out and pressed the doorbell. Footsteps, quick ones. The door swung open. My mother stood there, wine glass in hand, wearing a silver dress I recognized from the Saks catalog. Her eyes landed on mine, and for a breath, just one, she looked like she remembered me. Then her brow lifted ever so slightly, her lips curled into a polite smile, and she said, "Sorry, I think you've got the wrong house." Her voice was cold, deliberate, as if she'd rehearsed this moment to ensure I felt every ounce of her dismissal. She didn't wait for me to speak. The door clicked shut. The porch light remained on, casting a glow on the gift still in my hands. I stood there frozen, more from disbelief than heat. A gust of breeze lifted the hem of my coat. I knocked again, louder this time. "Mom!" My voice cracked. "It's me, Evelyn!" No answer. A shape moved behind the curtain, a silhouette glancing but never turning. Another knock. Then I stepped back, looked at the bay window. Inside, I saw Kendra. Kendra! Her golden curls were pinned up, and she was laughing at something someone said near the fireplace, and she was wearing the navy blue dress I'd given her for her college graduation back when we still talked. She walked past the window, pausing just long enough to glance toward me. Her eyes met mine. Then she looked away, sipping her drink as if she'd seen no one. That glance wasn't accidental. It was a calculated choice to erase me, a silent agreement with Mom's rejection. I knocked one last time. The door opened again, just a crack. "There's no Evelyn in here," my mother said. Her voice was quieter now, like I was the crazy one for insisting. Then nothing. The door shut again. I stood there until my hand went numb. Palm leaves drifted through the porch light. I looked back at the window and pulled out my phone. Zooming in, the dining room table was perfectly set. Gold-rimmed plates, crystal glasses, candles flickering, and the napkins white with I scanned them through my camera lens. Margaret, Peter, Ivan, Kendra. Every seat had a name, except mine. The napkin at the seat where I used to sit next to the kitchen doorway read, Kendra. The sight of my absence, etched into those napkins, burned deeper than any words they could have spoken. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The silver box trembled in my hand. Behind me, a car door shut. I turned. Uncle Stan's Buick. He looked confused for a moment, squinting in my direction. But before he could call out, my mother opened the door again, this time wide, and ushered him in quickly, hand on his back like nothing was amiss. I stood there like a fool. Then slowly I turned around. The breeze had picked up. Each step away from that house felt heavier than the last. I reached the car, fingers stiff, breath shallow. I let the gift fall. It hit the sand with a soft thud, the ribbon unraveling just a bit in the dust. I got into the driver's seat, shut the door, and stared at the windshield fogging in front of me. And in the quietest voice I've ever used, I asked the question that had lived in the corners of my heart for years. Did I ever even belong here? I sat in the silence of my car, the engine off, the dashboard still glowing faint blue. My fingers curled tight around the steering wheel, then loosened. I couldn't bring myself to drive, not yet. The windows slowly fogged as the heater faded. The air turned still. I reached for my phone, opened my camera roll swipe. A Thanksgiving photo from a few years back. We're all there. Kind of. I'm tucked into the edge of the frame, half-shadowed like I wandered into someone else's memory. Another image. Christmas. Kendra front and center in that red velvet dress. Dad's arm slung proudly around her shoulder. Mom holding her wine, smiling big. I'm there too, again, on the end, holding a tray, smiling but not really seen. I whispered to no one. I always thought I was just the quiet one. Now I wonder if I was simply edited out. Every photo was a reminder that I'd been cropped from their narrative, my presence reduced to a prop in their perfect family portrait. I turned the screen off and leaned back. The humidity from outside crept in through the glass, and with it something older than warmth. Familiar. Like being 13 again and realizing that the seat next to Mom at the dinner table was never mine to begin with. I closed my eyes, and before I could stop myself, the memories came flooding in. I was 13. Kendra had ballet. I had dishes. I'd come home from school, drop my bag, and roll up my sleeves. The kitchen always smelled like something half-finished. I'd cook dinner while Kendra practiced piano, her music echoing down the hallway. Mom would poke her head in, nod at the bubbling pot, and say, "You're so helpful, sweetie." But when Kendra sat down for a break, it was, "Your sister is so driven. She's going places." I didn't mind. I truly didn't. I told myself it was just the way things were, that it made me good to be needed. On my 18th birthday, there was no cake, no card. Kendra had a college interview across town, and Mom said it was too stressful a week for celebrations. So I said nothing, like always, because somewhere along the way I had swallowed the belief that my job was to not make a fuss, to carry weight in silence. The kind of daughter who filled gaps, got rooms, but even then, I felt the sting of being overlooked, a wound I'd buried under years of selflessness. Back in the present, I opened my banking app, savings not as high as it used to be. My fingers hovered, then tapped into my sent payments. There it was, $4,000, 0 cents, to Tranquil Smiles Dentistry under Mom's name. I'd paid her dental work in full. She never brought it up again. Another one? $5,500, 0 cents to Greenscape Design. The backyard revamp she couldn't afford last year. Then the big one. $12,000, 0 cents to Kendra's escrow account. A temporary loan, she'd said, just until I sell the Camry. That was 5 years ago. I stared at the numbers. I had paid. I had given. I had erased my own line items from their ledgers. Maybe that's why they think I'm easy to forget, I murmured. Because I made forgetting myself a habit? Each transaction was a silent scream of my devotion, ignored by the very people I'd sacrificed for. I closed the app, opened Facebook. Mom's page loaded first. Photos from tonight had already gone up, taken just minutes ago. She looked radiant. Kendra was tagged, smiling, champagne in hand. A caption, "Grateful for family, 45 years strong." I scrolled back. A post from last year. A sunny shot of the backyard. New patio stones, sleek outdoor lighting. Text over it, Proud of Kendra for designing our new family patio. What a blessing she is designing. She hadn't lifted a finger. I paid that invoice myself. I opened my email, searched Greenscape. There it was. My message to Mom. Hi Mom, I'll cover this. Consider it an early birthday gift. No response. Not even a thank you. The silence from that email was louder than any rejection, a confirmation they'd taken my generosity and rewritten it as their own. I let the phone fall onto the passenger seat and closed my eyes. All those years, all those little olive branches I kept extending, booking family cabins on weekends, they'd cancel, sending gifts that went unmentioned, rearranging holidays to suit their schedules, always hoping, always thinking that if I just showed up one more time, gave one more thoughtful gesture, maybe, just maybe I'd be seen. But I never made it to the center. I was always just orbiting their world. I sat in that car on the curb outside the house I used to call home and whispered, maybe I was never part of the family they wanted, just the one they used. I drove for a while with no clear destination, just me, the road, and a strange calm that settled into my chest like something final. I pulled into a small hotel about 20 minutes from the house. Not a chain, just a 2-story building with a parking lot out front and lights that flickered slightly in the evening. Inside, the front desk clerk glanced up from her monitor and gave a polite smile. Welcome in. Visiting family for the party. That simple question hit like a slap. I paused, pretending to check my wallet for no reason. No, I said, managing a small smile. Just passing through. She handed me the key card. Room 213, elevators to your left. I nodded, took the key, and made my way down the narrow hallway, carpet muffling my steps. When I entered the room, I didn't bother to turn on the overhead light, just tossed my coat over the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence spread out like a blanket. It was muscle memory that made me reach for my phone. I wasn't even thinking, just avoiding stillness. I opened my email, typed Kendra into the search bar. At first, the usual things popped up. Invoices, confirmations, some forwarded newsletters from years ago. Then something odd appeared. A message from Margaret. Subject line, use her for this. My breath caught. It was from almost 4 years ago, a forwarded email chain originally between Margaret and Kendra, but one of the forwards must have gone out to a larger family group, and somehow I had been on it. Inside, my name was all over the thread. Margaret had written, "Let Evelyn fund the kitchen project. She'll think it's a surprise for Dad." Another reply, "Don't make it too obvious, she's sensitive about feeling left out. That kitchen remodel had cost me over $20,000, 0 cents. I'd been told it was a group effort, everyone pitching in. I had paid the bulk of it up front, thinking I was doing something thoughtful, meaningful. They used me like a credit card with feelings. The email was a gut punch. Proof they'd conspired to exploit my kindness while keeping me in the dark. I closed the email slowly, like it might bite. My fingers felt cold, though the room wasn't. A thought pushed into my mind, reluctant but insistent. How long had this been happening? I opened a spreadsheet app on my phone, started entering numbers. Braces for Kendra's daughter, $5,000, 0 cents. Mom's dental crowns, $4,000, 0 cents. Each rental HOA dues, $3,200, 0 cents. New tires for Mom's car, $1,300, 0 cents. Kendra's down payment loan, $12,000, 0 cents. Last-minute airfare for Christmas I never got to attend, $1,000, 0 cents. Grocery delivery to Mom's place during the pandemic, $3,500, 0 cents over a year. Monthly deposits to the family savings account, $350, 0 cents month for 7 years, $29,400, 0 cents. Row after row, I filled the screen. My chest tightened. Not from sadness. Something else like heat. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was the pattern. They reached out around the holidays, for birthdays, when someone was sick or in transition, but never for me, not when I moved, Not when I lost my marketing job in 22. Not when I had surgery and had to take a cab home from the hospital because no one answered the phone. The screen blurred. Then I saw one transaction I had nearly forgotten. A $8,500 0 cents withdrawal from the family savings account just 3 weeks ago. I clicked the note. Event coordinator deposit. It took me a moment to process that party, that shimmering exclusive anniversary dinner I had stood outside of tonight. My money had helped fund it. I felt sick. They threw a celebration, popped champagne, took photos under chandeliers I helped hang with a check, and still looked me in the eye and said, "Sorry, wrong house." The betrayal was a poison, seeping into every memory of love I'd ever held for them. I stood up, paced to the window. Naples was quiet this late at night, trees bare, sidewalks slick with dew. I stared into the dark and tried to remember when I last felt part of them. The truth was, maybe never. I walked back to the desk, printed the spreadsheet from my phone. The numbers filled 2 pages. I placed it flat beside the silver-wrapped gift box, and the handwritten card I had brought tonight, the one that still read, "To Mom and Dad, 45 years of marriage is no small feat. You've taught me more than I can say about love, commitment, and giving selflessly with love. Evelyn, giving selflessly." They had taught me that all right, just not in the way I thought. I didn't cry. Not this time. I breathed slowly, feeling my spine straighten, as though I'd been hunched over for decades and just now realized it. They wanted my money, not my presence. That line landed hard like a door closing from the inside. I reached for my phone again, opened my banking app, hovered over the accounts. My thumb floated above the transfer funds button. Not yet. Not tonight. Instead, I whispered to myself like I was reading someone else's story aloud. Let's see who they become without me. The next morning, I woke up before sunset on July 10, 2026. No alarm, just my body deciding it had rested enough in that stale hotel bed. The spreadsheet printout still sat on the nightstand next to the gift box, unopened, like a ghost I couldn't send away. Before my feet touched the carpet, I picked up my phone and opened my bank app. No more hesitation. I paused each auto transfer, monthly payments that had once felt like duties. $350 0 cents here, $450 0 cents there. The biggest one, $1,300 0 cents, had been silently deducted each month into what we called the family reserve. It stopped today. Then I called the bank and revoked every authorized user linked to my credit cards. My voice I didn't offer explanations. The woman on the line confirmed each step with polite detachment, never asking why the changes. After that, I closed a separate savings account, one Margaret had access to, though I now realized she never should have. I wasn't acting out of rage. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just unplugged the power. This time, I don't need anyone's permission to pull back. Every account I closed was a chain I broke, freeing myself from their endless demands. 4 days passed. No calls from Mom, no texts from Kendra, not even a passive-aggressive forward from Aunt June with a Bible verse and no context. But on the 5th morning, while stirring black coffee in the hotel room, my phone rang. The caller ID said D, my cousin. We hadn't spoken in over a year. I hesitated, then picked up. "Hey," she said, her voice unusually soft. "Can I talk to you for a second? Go ahead." There was a pause, and then she exhaled. "I was at the anniversary party. I didn't know what they were doing until it was already happening. I'm ashamed. I didn't say anything. I let the silence do the work. Margaret told everyone you weren't coming, but not in a 'she's busy' kind of way," she said. Dee paused again. "She said you were not part of this anymore, that you're obsessed with money and drama." I swallowed hard. I could practically hear the wine glasses clinking in the background of her memory. She told guests that, word for word. "Yes," Dee sounded shaken. "But get this. They used your wine crate as a centerpiece, the one you brought back from Soma. It was in the middle of the main table. Of course it was. They didn't even flip it. Your initials were showing." I closed my eyes and breathed through my teeth. "Thanks for telling me, Evelyn," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't know what to do, but I saw you outside through the curtain. You looked like someone who had to learn her place," I finished for her. "No," Dee whispered. "Like someone who deserved better." We hung up. That night, I did what I hadn't dared since I left the house. I searched social media. I went to Kendra's page first. Her curated museum of false humility. Every photo from the party was up. Candles, flowers, smiling guests. Kendra in a long blue dress pressed against our parents, beaming like a poster child for Hallmark. Every caption read the same. "So grateful for 45 years of love. We are blessed." I scanned through every image, and there it was. The gift I had brought, still wrapped in silver paper, placed on a side table in the background. The card I'd written had been turned so the front faced the wall. Not trashed, not given back, just hidden. Seeing my gift discarded like that was a final twist of the knife, a symbol of how they'd buried my existence while profiting from my generosity. But the biggest gut punch came 3 days later. A bill from my property manager popped up in my inbox. Routine, until I noticed the name on the utility setup. It wasn't who I expected. The apartment I owned in downtown Miami, my fallback if I ever needed to start over, had been leased out again. I'd been told it was a friend of the family looking for a short-term stay. I trusted them, but now it was Kendra's new boyfriend? I didn't even know she had one. I checked my lease system. My name was on the ownership, but the lease had been altered 6 months ago. The utilities were in his name, no signed documents from me. I called the manager. He said, "Oh, Margaret said you'd approved everything. That's why we didn't follow up." Of course, she did. The pieces clicked together too easily. Mom had slipped him in quietly, using my name, my property, my money, as if I were a silent investor in a life I wasn't welcome in. But I didn't explode. Not this time. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started organizing. Emails, receipts, digital trails, old screenshots. I even pulled up voice memos from calls I'd recorded with my bank and property manager, legal in Florida. It felt mechanical, clinical, like I was filing the obituary of a family that never really existed. They've confused kindness for weakness. That's their first mistake. The next morning, I printed a single sheet of paper. At the top in bold, it read, "Everything you've built on me is coming down." No threats, no summary, just those words. I placed it in a plain envelope, no return address, slid it into the hotel Dropbox for outgoing mail, addressed to Margaret, and walked away. I watched the envelope disappear through the hotel's mail slot with a stillness I hadn't felt in years. The moment was quiet, sharp, final. It was my declaration of war, not with screams, but with the quiet power of truth they could no longer ignore. But after something like that, you wait. You wait for the rumble. What came first was silence. 6 days passed. I kept my phone close, not out of hope but readiness. I half expected Margaret to unleash a monologue laced with martyrdom, or Kendra to unleash guilt-coated charm. But nothing. Until the 7th night. I was sipping lukewarm tea and scrolling through a list of local jobs, thinking about picking up part-time consulting again. Something simple, something just mine, when a notification chimed. Kendra Ree, just checking in. The subject line alone irritated me, but I opened it. "Hey E, just saw something Mom mentioned. Not sure what you meant by that note. Hope everything's okay. Maybe you're going through something. I'm here if you need to talk. XOK. She knew exactly what that note meant. She'd probably read it out loud at brunch. I didn't reply. Not even a period. Not even a click of the reply button. Let them wonder. I've spent enough of my life explaining. The next morning, I drove downtown to meet my attorney. We sat across from each other in her glass-walled office, her tapping the edge of my spreadsheet printout with a capped pen. "Unauthorized occupancy, forged rental documents, and a misuse of funds tied to your name," she said, flipping the page. "I assume you're ready to go on record." I nodded. "No second chances, no phone calls." "Good," she said. "We'll send formal notices by certified mail, and to the tenant, one to Margaret, one to Kendra. 4 days later, the letters went out. Cease and desist, 45-day eviction. Language so precise it left no room for pleading. Every name spelled correctly, every legal clause bolded. I didn't post about it, didn't call to warn them. No theatrics, just clarity and distance. That night I was folding laundry back at the hotel when I came across a small photo wedged between 2 pages of a journal I hadn't touched in months. It was me, maybe 5 years old, sitting on Margaret's lap in a faded yellow sundress. Her hand was on my back. We were both laughing at something outside the frame. I sat down on the bed and stared at it for a long time. Was that moment real? Was that love ever real? Or had I just been born into a play, never given the script? The photo mocked me with its innocence, a lie of love that made their betrayal cut even deeper. I opened my laptop and hovered over a new email window, typed mom in the to field, then paused. My fingers trembled, not from sadness, but confusion. I started typing. I'm sorry if I've hurt you. But before I could finish, the memory flashed back, the front door slamming, her eyes flat as glass. Sorry, I think you've got the wrong house. I closed the email and hit delete, and I didn't second guess it this time. The next morning, something unexpected popped up in my inbox. It was a message from a name I barely recognized. Doris Blankenship, one of Margaret's church friends. Her message was short, unpolished but honest. Dear Evelyn, I wasn't going to say anything, but I need to. I overheard Margaret last week. She was telling a group that you've always been difficult, too intense, not easygoing like Kendra. I just want to tell you, that's not what people saw. I saw how many times you showed up, what you paid for, what you gave, and I'm sorry they never said thank you. It was the first unsolicited kindness I'd received through all this. Not validation, not drama, just quiet truth from a woman who didn't owe me a thing. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then closed my eyes and let it land. Not everyone had looked away. That was enough. Later that afternoon, I went for a walk by the Gulf. The breeze off the water was sharp, but it cleared my head. Seagulls called overhead. Children chased each other across the gravel paths. It was a life that kept moving even when mine had paused. When I got back, I picked up a fresh notebook, wrote at the top, "They used my money, my silence, and my guilt. Now I take back all 3. It felt good to see it written in ink. The next few hours I made changes, quiet ones. Opened a new bank account under my full legal name, Evelyn Isabella, not E, not D, not the nickname they used when they wanted something. I transferred all remaining funds, sent my attorney the spreadsheet of every payment, loan, gift, and erased credit just in case. And when that was done, I put on soft jazz, made a sandwich, and sat in peace until my phone buzzed. A voicemail. I played it on speaker. Margaret's voice filled the room, sharp, clipped. Evelyn, this is your last chance to come to your senses. Don't make this ugly. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't helping anyone. Don't drag this into something it doesn't need to be. There was a pause. Then she hung up. I didn't save the message, didn't respond, didn't even blink. I hit delete. The voicemail echoed in my head as I sat by the window, watching gray morning light crawl across the hotel parking lot. That tone in Margaret's voice, so calm, so rehearsed, was the same tone she'd used my entire life to pin blame without raising her voice. It always sounded like concern, but it always meant control. I pulled out my laptop and opened a letter to her, not to draft a letter to her, not to Kendra. I was done appealing to the same walls I'd been talking to for decades. Instead, I addressed it to the HOA board of the Naples Pines Neighborhood Association. The letter was brief, factual, no emotion. To whom it may concern, I am the legal owner of Unit 10C, located at 437 South Parkwood Drive. It has come to my attention that my property has been occupied by an unauthorized tenant without a lease or my consent. Attached are scanned copies of my original lease agreement, my signature, and recent evidence of document tampering, specifically false signatures submitted under my name. I added screenshots, dates, my notarized deed, I included a photo of the so-called tenant unloading wine crates at Margaret's anniversary party, and then I sent it off. By 1:00 p.m. I received a reply, not from legal, but from Linda Cartwright, a longtime board member and Margaret's friend. "Hi, Evelyn. We've received your message and understand your concerns. However, given your mother's long-standing contributions to this community, we'd prefer to handle this matter internally. Thank you for your understanding." I closed the email and immediately re-forwarded everything to the HOA's legal department with the subject line, "Official complaint, fraudulent use of private property" attached again, this time with a cover page labeled "Escalation Requested." They could protect Margaret if they wanted, but I wasn't asking anymore. By the end of the week, something shifted, subtle at first. At the grocery store near the beach, I saw a woman in a cardigan from 3 blocks over glance at me, then quickly look away. At a local diner, someone whispered, "That's her, right? The daughter they left out." I never said a word. I never explained. But Naples was a small enough town that the truth didn't need a microphone. It only needed momentum. That weekend, someone slid a folded note under Margaret's front door. I only knew because a neighbor posted about it on the Nextdoor app. "She funded your lifestyle and you shut her out." No signature, just that line written in neat cursive on stationery. That same night, Kendra's boyfriend was seen quietly loading boxes into a rental van. No goodbye waves, no porch lights. Just a shadow slinking back into wherever he'd come from. I watched it all from a distance. Didn't even flinch. And then came the blog post. It was from a local lifestyle site, usually filled with recipes and church bake sale photos. But this one? It stood out like blood on sand. The party funded by silence. It didn't name anyone directly, but it didn't have to. The photos were there. Elegant wine crates and floral arrangements, the same that Margaret had claimed Kendra handcrafted. The same crates I'd paid for 7 months ago for an art show I never had time to host. The blog hinted at a family celebration paid for by the one person who wasn't invited. Margaret's friends began to ghost her. Kendra quietly scrubbed every anniversary picture from her social media, one by one. No explanations, just gone. They were erasing the evidence, but it was too late. The blog was a public reckoning, exposing their hypocrisy to a community they'd deceived for years. Later that week, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. Evelyn. It was my father's second wife, Deborah. I hadn't spoken to her since their divorce. "I don't mean to intrude," she said, "but I saw the article and I just wanted to say what they did to you. It was cruel. I should have said something a long time ago. I'm sorry I didn't. I didn't expect tears, but they came. Quiet, embarrassed ones. Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just breathing, just letting the ache soften. And then out of nowhere came the email. Not from a bank, not from a lawyer, from someone named Marlene Riley. Subject: Women's Finance Brunch, Invitation to Speak. Dear Evelyn, a few of us read the article and were so moved by your story. We host a monthly brunch to help local women talk about money, boundaries, and legacy. We'd love to have you share how you took back control of your finances and your voice. You don't have to say yes, but you'd be welcome. I read it twice, 3 times. I didn't respond right away, but for the first time in weeks, I smiled. That morning, I stepped into a sunlit room above a bookstore cafe where the brunch was already underway. A table of women greeted me with warm smiles and paper name tags. No podium, no flashing cameras, just real people, some sipping coffee, some silently folding their napkins. I didn't read from a speech. I didn't even hold notes. I used to think generosity meant silence, I said, scanning the faces. I was wrong. I spoke carefully, avoiding names but laying bare the pattern. How guilt disguised as duty kept me writing checks and swallowing disrespect. How being the easy one came with a price tag no one ever saw, and how the moment I stopped paying, the truth came out. There wasn't a sound when I finished, and then a wave of nods. One woman dabbed at her cheek. Another leaned forward like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. Afterward, a woman named Joyce, maybe late 60s, short silver bob, came up and placed her hand gently on mine. "Would you consider mentoring others who've been through this?" she asked. "We need women like you, women who've survived being erased by their own family and came out clearer." I didn't have an answer ready, but I didn't say no. A few days later, something else surfaced. An anonymous post showed up on a local online forum, not the kind people take seriously, but the kind neighbors love to scroll through while sipping tea, entitled "Daughter Throws Tantrum After Not Being Center of Attention, Cries Financial Abuse from Her High-Rise Apartment." Sad, really. I didn't need a signature to recognize that tone. The phrasing "not being center of attention," cries, abuse, Ryer of Margaret's way, of cutting people with sugar on her tongue. I didn't react, didn't even log in. I knew what they wanted, a rebuttal, a response, a crack in my armor, but I'd built something stronger than anger: silence. Their attempt to smear me only deepened my resolve, proving they feared the truth I was uncovering. The next day, a letter came, this time not from Margaret herself but through her attorney, a neatly typed page implying I was damaging the family's name, that further public insinuations could lead to a defamation suit. I laughed, a quiet, genuine laugh, then forwarded the letter to my own attorney with a single line: "See attached documentation." She already had the spreadsheet, the receipts, the notarized lease, but now I added one more thing: a written statement from an old family friend who had witnessed Margaret's property manipulation firsthand, a backup witness willing to testify. I was done being the only one with evidence. Now I had backup. That same evening, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. "Evelyn." The voice was older, warm, but wary. "This is Vivian. I used to work with your mother. We were in HR together for 17 years. I paused. "Hi. I saw that post online and I'm sorry." I waited. "I still have the records from back when Margaret almost lost her house. You were the only reason she didn't. I kept the emails. She told us you'd help, but begged us not to say anything. I know it's not much, but I wanted you to have them just in case. Just in case." The woman emailed me that night copies of old correspondence, payment records, even text messages where Margaret instructed her to keep Evelyn in the loop without making her feel used. It was the kind of paper trail you don't ask for, but thank God someone kept. Those records were a final nail, sealing the truth of their deception in undeniable ink. The next morning, my lawyer sent one final letter. "All further attempts to disparage my client will be considered legal violations. Future communication must proceed through our office. No room for interpretation, no soft landing." I didn't send a press release, didn't hold a press conference, but I did make a quiet donation to a nonprofit that supports women recovering from financial coercion and familial gaslighting. I signed it with just my first name, because that was enough now. I wasn't doing it to be seen. I was doing it to breathe. That evening, as the sun slipped low behind the trees, my phone buzzed. "Kendra!" I hesitated, then picked up. She didn't start with hi, no apology, just "Mom's freaking out. She says you've ruined everything. The party, her reputation. She can't even show her face at church. Can we just talk?" I stood at my kitchen window, watching a squirrel dig up an old acorn from the garden. "Sure," I said calmly. "Let's talk." Kendra's voice still echoed in my ears when I arrived at the cafe we'd agreed on. It was neutral ground, public, calm, and far away from the grand halls and backyards where most of our family confrontations had played out in the past. She was already seated, tapping nervously at her untouched iced coffee. When she looked up, I saw it. The smudged eyeliner, the hair she hadn't bothered to straighten, the cardigan slipping off one shoulder. This wasn't the sister who always had something rehearsed to say. As I slid into the seat across from her, she exhaled a breath she'd clearly been holding. "Mom's spiraling," she said quietly. "She's been calling donors, friends from the HOA, even old church contacts. People are backing away. Some aren't returning her calls. She's freaking out. I didn't say anything. I just opened the bag on my lap and pulled out a navy blue binder. I placed it between us slowly. On the front, in gold lettering, it read, 6 years of unpaid emotional debt. Kendra's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. This isn't revenge, I said, my voice low but steady. This is clarity. This is everything you've pretended never happened. Everything you dismissed as help or support or just being the easy one. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were page protectors filled with bank transfers, gift receipts, forwarded emails, copies of rent deferment letters, and even that party invoice from the family account she claimed she didn't know about. She flipped through silently. "You kept all this?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "You forced me to," I answered, because every time I tried to bring it up, I was told I was dramatic or greedy, or worse, imagining it. For the first time since we sat down, she met my gaze. "We didn't think you'd ever fight back," she said, and for the first time I let the silence sit. Then I said, "Neither did I. Not until I realized I was never really included to begin with. The binder was my weapon, each page a testament to their lies, and I wielded it with the precision of someone who'd waited too long to strike." Kendra shifted in her seat, then reached into her bag. "I brought something," she said, pulling out a small box wrapped in worn tissue paper. "We kept this." She placed it on the table and opened the lid. Inside was the old ceramic pie dish, the one I'd used every Thanksgiving for a decade, the one that had shattered the night I wasn't invited home. It was still cracked through the middle, crusted faintly with dried apple filling that had never been rinsed out properly. "We thought," she started. I looked at it, then at her. "You kept the broken part," I said. "That fits." I pushed the box gently back across the table. "I don't need it." Her lips trembled, but she didn't push again. That night, back in my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the blank screen of my laptop for nearly an hour before I began to type. The title came first, What We Owe Ourselves, Reclaiming Worth. After Family Eraser, I wrote the piece as plainly as I could. I didn't dress it in poetic prose or dramatic flair. I told the story the way it had happened to me, not naming names, just patterns, cycles, the long, invisible toll of being expected to give endlessly and never be seen. I submitted it to a small local journal. A week later, I was flooded. The article had gone viral, not on a grand national scale, but quietly, meaningfully, in circles of women's advocacy, in financial literacy forums, in caregiver support groups, in inboxes across the country. Strangers wrote to me, "This happened to me. I just never knew how to say it. You put into words what I couldn't for 25 years." I thought I was the only one who felt erased. I responded to each one because being heard, even by strangers, reminded me that I hadn't imagined it. Weeks passed. One Wednesday afternoon, a plain white envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, handwritten in slanted cursive. Inside, a wedding invitation. Margaret's. No note, no apology, just my name printed cleanly on the RSVP line. I stood by the shredder for a long moment, the paper still warm in my hands from the envelope. I didn't need to guess what this was. It wasn't peace. It wasn't accountability. It was an image to salvage, an illusion to restore. I fed the invitation into the shredder slowly, watching it split, curl, and vanish into the blades. Some doors stay closed for a reason. After shredding the invitation, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't even call anyone to tell them about it. I simply stood in the quiet of my kitchen, letting the last paper thread curl into the bin. Some doors deserve to stay closed, not slammed, not locked in rage, just closed, because walking back through them only leads to the same bruises in new places. It had been nearly 6 months since I'd spoken to Margaret or Kendra. My lease had expired, and I'd taken it as a sign. I moved to a quieter part of the city, closer to the coast, where the air didn't carry the scent of old family memories. My new place was modest but warm. the kind of space that welcomed solitude without making it feel like loneliness. On Saturdays, I taught free workshops at a community center for women navigating financial independence, most rebuilding after divorce or walking away from toxic households. We covered basics like budgeting, understanding loans, credit repair, but we also talked about trust, guilt, and how to unlearn the belief that you have to earn your place in a family with money. Some days were filled with laughter, others were filled with silence, but none of it was laced with manipulation. Vivian dropped by once in a while, always bringing cinnamon muffins and some new article clipped from the Miami Herald about elder fraud or estate disputes. 2 former neighbors from my old street, ones I hadn't even realized were paying attention, showed up to a class and stayed after to thank me. Then, one rainy Friday afternoon, the director of the center knocked on the door of the meeting room. "Evelyn, I know this is last minute," she said, lowering her voice. "There's a girl here, teenager, her mom kicked her out. She chose college over staying home to work. The kid's a mess. Would you mind talking with her?" I looked up from the stack of handouts I was organizing. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I know exactly what to say." That evening, back home, I started unpacking the last few boxes I hadn't touched since the move. They were mostly books, old consulting texts, novels I'd always told myself I'd read once I had the time. One box was taped differently, no return label, no handwriting I recognized. I opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in brown tissue and burlap string, was a handmade ceramic pie dish. The glaze shimmered faintly blue in the light. There was a note tucked beneath it, handwritten in block letters because the old one was cracked. "This one is yours alone. Keep baking, just not for them." No name, no explanation. But it didn't matter. I smiled slowly, genuinely. I placed the dish on the shelf above my stove, not to use, but to remember. It wasn't just a replacement. It was a marker, a silent acknowledgement that something had been broken, and that I didn't have to glue it back together to feel whole again. I never got the old house back. I never got Margaret's version of love, the kind with strings and ledgers and unspoken expectations. But I built something better. In my new home, there are no framed photos of the people who ghosted me out of family dinners. Instead, there are snapshots from my classes, women holding calculators like shields, notes scribbled with budgeting plans, a teenager smiling faintly next to a college acceptance letter she printed at the center. I took the brunch flyer from the first event where I'd shared my story and had it framed. Below it I wrote in my own handwriting, "Family is not who opens the door, it's who keeps it open when you're standing in the heat." 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I sat on my porch sipping coffee when the idea came to me, almost like a whisper. I opened my laptop and filmed a short voiceover for a new video I was helping the center prepare. My voice was steady, but soft. Sometimes the harshest rejection is what sets you free. Sometimes the silence after the slammed door is the first breath of peace. I let the words settle before I added, "Have you ever walked away from family and found yourself instead? Then gently tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if you're still standing on that porch, just know you don't have to knock again." A long pause. One last breath. You're not the wrong person. They were just the wrong house.